This is Backstage Sonoma, your all-access pass to the local music scene.
Coming to you from beautiful downtown Santa Rosa, this is the Backstage Sonoma podcast. And now, here's your host, Steve Roby.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Backstage Sonoma. I'm Steve Roby. Today I'm excited to bring you a conversation with an incredible singer-songwriter, Jeffrey Foucault. Jeffrey is known for his stark, literate songs that cut straight to the heart, and he's here to talk about his brand new album, The Universal Fire. This record marks his first collection of new material since 2018, and it's a powerful tribute to the life of his longtime drummer and friend, Billy Conway. In today's interview, we'll dive deep into the inspiration behind the album, discuss how a tragic fire at Universal Studios inspired Jeffrey's reflection on the fragility of music and culture, and hear about how his recent tour has been a transformative journey through grief and creativity. Jeffrey will join me in a moment, but before we start, let's hear a taste of his new album. This is the title track from The Universal Fire, here on Backstage Sonoma.
Our religion was electric, magnetic singing on a wire. Invisible ways making kings out of slaves, encoding all freedom and desire. And we pulled it down from the sky to make us dance, to make us cry. And one night it all burned away. In the universal fire, they came singing in the darkness, shadows rocking in the loom of night. 10 million souls weighed out in silver and gold, 2 million gone straight to the light. And they wept and they moaned and they called down the intercession of some nameless choir. But the angel just let them keep singing until the night that it all burned away in the universal fire. Gravity pushes down the stylus, God disappears into the sky. Electroplated silver cuts the master from the mirror, everyone the iteration of a lie. We had Satchmo and the Killer and Sunrise. We had Bo Diddley and Big Mama and John Lee. And every soul now lossless in heaven until the night that it all burned away in the universal fire. You can photograph a painting through a screen door. You can try to square the circle down, but the God that you serve is the God of the curve, the irreducible mystery going round. left all alone with the copies of the masters of the name. Celluloid reels gone up in ashes, and still just the picture of a picture in a frame. It was Lady Day and Muddy and Coltrane, Little Walter and Rosetta and Ray. There was a time when it seemed we might all be redeemed, but then one night it all burned away, and the universe so
That was The Universal Fire, the title track for Jeffrey Foucault's new album, and I'm happy to say that Jeffrey is joining us now. Hey, Jeffrey, welcome to Backstage Sonoma.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm so glad you could be here. Hey, to kick things off, could you share a bit about your musical background for those in our audience discovering your music for the first time?
Yeah, I've been on the road since the turn of the previous century here. So I made my first record in 2000 and put it out in 2001. And that was a largely solo acoustic affair. You know, I wrote all the tunes. And those were all songs I wrote between the ages of about 19 and 24. I grew up in the Midwest in Wisconsin, and I learned to play guitar when I was about 17. My dad brought me home John Prine's first record, and I learned how to play guitar by learning those songs. And then I started writing not too very long after that, and I made an album, and one thing led to another, and within a few years I had a booking agent, a manager, and all that stuff, and I was out on the road, and I guess I've made, 6 or 7 solo records and 6 or 7, again, side projects, various rock and roll bands and stuff like that.
Yeah. Who would you say some of your earliest influences were, and how did they shape the sound you have today?
Well, probably the primary influence was my folks. My dad played guitar and sang, and my mom would sing along, and they both played a little bit of piano and stuff like that. They both were good singers, and so they sang around the house, and I heard that. I'm sure they sang to me when I was a little baby and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time I was paying attention to music, I had a sort of a strange, compressed baby boomer education. I found my parents' record collection. Some people that were moving away, friends of my grandparents, gave me a turntable when I was about 11, and I'd go in the basement and I would just pick out whatever looked interesting and blow the dust off the jacket, take it upstairs and put it on the turntable. And I think I sort of enjoyed how strange and tactile that experience was. And I made my way through their record collection that they amassed between, let's say, Chubby Checker and the singer-songwriter movement of the early 70s. I went through that in about 3-4 years. And by the time I was 14, I heard Bob Dylan's record Highway 61 revisited, and I didn't know what it meant, but I really liked it, and I found it really perplexing and nonlinear, which was sort of hard on my Midwestern brain. So I'd sit there and lift up the needle on the turntable and transcribe all the lyrics too.
Yeah, that's some good songwriting on that album too.
Yeah, totally. Then after that, John Prine, and then around the time I was really thinking about writing, I was really into the Texas songwriters like Guy Clark and Rodney Crowell and Townes Van Zandt and Flatlanders and all those characters.
Okay. So let's talk about the new album, The Universal Fire. It carries a heavy emotional weight, especially after losing your good friend, Billy Conway. Can you talk about how this personal experience influenced the songwriting process for this record?
Yeah. Well, a couple things happened. Billy got sick with cancer, and so we couldn't tour as much as we wanted to. And then right after that, the pandemic sort of shut everything down and nobody could tour. And so I lost a little bit of time that I would have spent on the road with him. And then he died in 21, and I'd been waiting to make a record. I wasn't going to make one without him, but he wasn't feeling ready to make one for a variety of reasons. And then really after a while, he just wasn't able to do that anymore.
Sure.
So after he was gone, I knew, the one thing I was going to probably address would be the fact of his dying. And so I was spending that time trying to figure out how to write my way toward those things, or how to take the songs that were fragments and pieces that had already shown up and have them all be pointed in the same direction. And I, because there was such a long interval between the prior release, the last record we'd made together came out in 18, and then we toured it in 19, and then 20, everything shut down, right? So it was that sort of enforced drought. And I did some recording during the pandemic, but I wasn't really interested in just hearing myself, so that kind of went by the board. But what I found when I got all the songs put together, and I had about 45 of them, there was 10 or 15 that were all, even if they weren't directly pointed at that experience of grieving my best friend, they were still about loss in one way or another. They could be about sort of cultural loss, they could be about the loss of an artifact, or they could be about the loss of a relationship. So all those songs, if you take them apart, they're all very different. There's rock and roll songs and country songs and folk songs on there, but they all deal with some version of losing something.
Right. Well, can we talk about the title track that we played at the top of the show, The Universal Fire? I was listening to it deeply this morning with the headphones on, and there's such vivid details. Can you talk about the story of the fire at Universal and all the recordings that were lost in it, and what inspired you to write that song?
Yeah, it was a funny thing. I didn't know about that big fire that happened at Universal Studios in '08 when it happened, because that was the same year my wife and I had our daughter, and we were just not paying much attention to the rest of the world. We were pretty inward at that point. So I didn't know anything about it. I had missed, and then I picked up some news coverage maybe about 10 years later, and I was like, holy cow, this thing had happened where the old backstage lot at Universal, where they housed a lot of the master recordings of really important American music. And we're talking, everything from Chess Records and Chuck Berry and
John
Billie
Coltrane,
Holiday, all these people that were just incredibly important.
Yeah.
The masters had gone up in smoke, and it took them a long time to figure out. At first they thought they didn't lose much, and then they thought they lost everything. And then after a while it appeared maybe they hadn't lost quite as much as they thought, but they were fairly secretive about it. And it wasn't really so much the fact of losing that stuff, although that was kind of a gut punch, right? Because that was the music that had determined the course of my life. And the first line of that tune is like, our religion was electric. And I meant like my religion, Billy's religion, it was what we shared together. That was our musical education. But it was also like, as a country, that was our religion, right? Like music is the one pretty transcendent communitarian experience that we all have together, especially now that we've, sort of drifted away from getting together in churches or having really meaningful social interactions beyond that. In our civic life, I felt like that was kind of the common thread. So really, I wasn't trying to make like a giant summary statement about anything. I was trying to ask the question, what does it mean? Like if you lose these things, did you ever have them in the first place? And then it started to ask the question. By the time you get to the third verse, I'm thinking about the nature of recording and artifacts. And when you record in a room with a bunch of people, the true thing that happened is what happened in that room, and you were there to hear it. And that was as close to the truth as you'll ever get. And then the first recording of that, the first capture of that, the moment you try to duplicate it, you begin to lose information. And then every step as you duplicate it further, right? Like we run stuff into streams and it becomes compressed. And if the song is like you're looking out the window, imagine the song is subdivided into a grid, like you're looking through a screen. And now the streams, they're going to delete maybe 15, 18% of the squares, and that's what you're left with. You still hear it as a thing, and your brain stitches it together, but you're missing the full fidelity of that experience. And so then, what the question is like, does it matter? Right? That's what I was wondering about, and it felt good to sort of build a rock and roll song around it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for explaining that. The lyrics are so deep, I was getting lost in your songwriting. It was a beautiful song.
Oh, thanks. Well, the other element of that is there's a long narrative poem by beginning to blank on the name by Hayden, Robert Hayden, the poet, and it's called Middle Passage. He was a mid-century poet, and he wrote really beautifully about, it's a devastating long poem about the slave trade, right? One of the things I was trying to get after in that song was, if if the original American sin, right, is this enslavement and genocide that we accomplished in order to build the country that we all inhabit, then I was, to me, at least on a sort of, and maybe this is sort of, fanciful or whatever, but, to me, like the real redemption of that, or the only possible redemption of that, was the beautiful music that came out of the collision of all these people who were forced together more or less by accident or against their will. And that's what the music was. And then, here it is, like the angels just let them keep singing is the line on the tune.
Yeah.
But then it all burns away, right? So like, what was it for? What did it mean?
Yeah.
I just keep sort of circling back to that question.
Yeah. It was beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's play another track from the album. This one's called Solo Modelo. Can you share the backstory with our listeners before we play it?
Well, it's kind of funny. I wrote it more or less almost as simple as like a nursery rhyme, right? Solo Modelo, Solo Hotel, so long I can't tell you, I'm wishing you well. I just wrote it like a postcard to Billy. He was sick. He was back home on his ranch in Montana. And I had to do the first solo tour I'd done in, I don't know, a decade, something like that. And so I was going out, and my people sent the contract writer for the full band. And so everywhere I went, I'm just driving around in a rental car with one guitar and a microphone, and I'm playing like an unplugged show. And everywhere I go, they're giving me a case of Mexican beer and a couple bottles of French wine. And I had to start giving it away because it was just all sloshing around in the trunk. But I just wrote it, Bill and I would always have Mexican beers on the contract writer. And then at the end of the night, you grab a couple beers and you stick them in your bag. And when you get back to the hotel, you have the late drink and talk about the gig and all the shit that happened. And, that's where that came from. I was just kind of sending it to him like, all right, here I am. I'm out doing it by myself, and I'm trying to see it again for the first time and thinking about what it meant to be. I'd done it. There was always Billy and I. He'd bring a suitcase kit. I'd bring 2 guitars. And then sometimes we'd scale up. We'd bring bass and play trio. We'd play pedal steel or electric guitar and play trio. Sometimes we'd play quartet when there was a new record out. Then we'd tour the whole country as a full band. But then when that was over, those release tours were over, I'd go back to just me and Bill, right?
Yeah.
And that was kind of the fundamental musical unit. And so to bust it down and try to play those songs without the backbeat, that was the feeling of Solo Modelo.
Okay. Well, let's play it now. This is Solo Modelo by Jeffrey Foucault, and you're listening to Backstage Sonoma.
Solo Modelo, Solo Hotel, Solo I can't tell you, but I'm wishing you well, wishing you well. Solo gas station, Solo cafe, Solo I've been crying since you went away. You went away. You went away. I know you've been walking the valley alone. One crow above you, won't leave you alone. I know you've been singing your way through the dark. Your silk scarf down on me don't keep you warm. No. Solo black, walking away, just walking away, walking away. You know I'm walking away. So long, Modelo. So long, Modelo. So long, Modelo. So long, Modelo. So long, Milwaukee. So long, Black Coffee. So long, Modelo.
That was Solo Modelo by Jeffrey Foucault, a new track from his album Universal Fire, and you're tuned in to Backstage Sonoma. Jeffrey, you've worked with a stellar lineup on this new record. How did collaborating with John Convertino and Mike Lewis influence the album's overall sound, would you say?
I think John really framed, it was a really difficult decision for me, or maybe, no, it was difficult to decide whether I wanted to have drums. After Billy died, the full band went out and we just left an open chair where the drum kit was supposed to be. And we'd put a shot of tequila on it every night. And we would just listen to the space where he was not playing anymore. And that was kind of our missing man formation. And we did that for a full tour around. And then, I was going to make a record and I was trying to decide, do I want to do drums? And when I did decide I wanted to, my first call was John. And I've been listening to Calexico since, really they started. And I was aware of Giant Sand before that. And I knew that John had played with one of my heroes, a guy named Reiner Tacek, who was a slide guitar player out of Tucson. And I'd met John when I was out opening for Tiff Merritt, and he was playing in her band. So I knew him, and I had his phone number, and I knew he'd moved to El Paso, and I kind of wanted to work in Tucson, and so I called him up, and it just worked out. And then Mike Lewis, who's a bass player and a saxophone player, and he plays with Bon Iver, he had done some arrangement work for me during the pandemic, where I'd gone back and made some solo recordings of older songs where I was playing all the instruments, but I felt like they needed another element, and so he ended up doing some string arrangements on an album that I'd never managed to actually release. But I thought his musical vocabulary was far enough outside of what I'm used to doing. I didn't want somebody that was coming from Americana world or any of that stuff. And he's more or less a jazz musician, right? Like he's got a jazz trio called Happy Apple that's been on the scene in Minneapolis for 25 years. And he's just musically, he comes from a different vocabulary than I do, and that's. But I really trust his ears and his sensibility. So it was an easy call to pick somebody. When you're making a record, it's really useful to have a producer, if only because you would like to be available to make all the kinds of logistical decisions that a producer makes, but you're not available if you're trying to front the songs and front the band and be emotionally present and all that stuff. You're just never going to pull it all off. So it was a special session. We went down in January to Tucson. The band is scattered everywhere. We're going to somebody's flying no matter what. So we just decided to work someplace warm in the wintertime. And our pedal steel player, Eric Haywood, he drove down from Butte, Montana. And my electric guitar player, Eric Koskinen, he drove from Minneapolis. And then the bass player, Jeremy Moses Curtis, he and I got on planes and flew out from the East Coast. And John drove over from El Paso, and we all met up at a little casita in North Tucson that we rented for the week. And then we worked at a place called Wave Lab.
Oh, nice. Let's play one last track from the album. This is called Night Shift. What can you share about this with our listeners?
It was just a funny song. I found the lyric in a notebook. I was alone between shows in Montana, and I was pulled up on a day where I had planned to go out and fish, but then it turned windy and rainy, and I was inside. So I brewed a pot of coffee, and I just sat there and, played guitar for, hours and hours, which is something I used to do a lot, and I don't do as much anymore. And I found that lyric in a notebook and started fooling around with a sort of rock and roll shuffle feel, and it all tumbled out real fast. And sometimes that's just how they come, It's a song about being on the road, which, obviously is not the underexplored topic of all time. I think there's been a few songs about
just a few
being on the road, but I always liked that Mose Allison song called Nightclub, right? It says, I've been working in a nightclub so long, I can't hardly see the light of day. And I always thought it was a funny, very light take, on what it feels like to be on the road. So I was trying to write a very personal version of that thing, which is, the kind of get up and go. So
yeah.
I always tell people there's, it's kind of hard to pay attention to what all the words are. And there's one phrase in there that's a little odd. It's lobby call. And if you've ever been in a band, lobby call is the phrase you use when you get to the hotel and you're like, all right, we got to meet back here to go to sound check at, whatever, 5:00. So lobby call is 5:00. And then, you get back to the hotel at the end of the night and your tour manager, or if you don't have one, you tell the band, all right, we got to, we're driving 3 hours and the load in is at this time. So lobby call is going to be, whatever it is, 9:00 in the morning. So that's the deal. Lobby call, load in, sound check, showtime.
All right. Let's hear it now. This is Night Shift, a new track from Jeffrey Foucault, and you're listening to Backstage Sonoma. That was Night Shift, a new track from Jeffrey Foucault's new album, The Universal Fire. You're listening to Backstage Sonoma, and we're joined by Jeffrey today to talk about the new album and tour. Speaking of the tour, you've been on the road since the release of this album in September. and you'll be on the road, as I understand it, for the rest of the year. What has the audience response been like so far to the shows?
It's been great.
Yeah?
It's such a great band to be able to bring the full band, from the record and go out and play every night. It had been so long when the pandemic shut everything down. It had been so long since I had the opportunity to miss it. If somebody had asked me in February of 2020, what would you like most in the world? I might have said it would be really nice to sit still for a year. And then, that goes into the category of like, be careful what you wish for. But I did miss it. I really missed. And not only did I miss playing for people, but I missed being on the road for longer than if you go out for 3 days, about the end of that last show of 3 is when you start to feel like you can play guitar and sing. It's when the band starts to get really good. And so to be able to go out for half of every month, where you're playing 14 shows, maybe like in this one, we don't even have a day off. We're just going to go out. We'll start in LA and we'll go all the way up to British Columbia, and we're going to work every night. And I love doing that, and I love getting better, and the band just keeps rising. And there's a weird pathology to the experience of playing live music over and over again, because it's different every night.
Yeah,
the variables are different. How everybody feels is different. What everybody is able to hear and what they do hear is different. And so sometimes, like a song that's become incredibly reliable, and everybody, and you're like, oh, well, we got this one now. And so suddenly it's like a building that you can't find the key to, and you don't know why, but some other song begins to get really good. I don't know. That's the part I missed. Like, not just being out, but being out long enough to feel like you're really pretty far into the groove with your band.
Gosh, where do you find your stamina to do a long haul like that?
I tell you what, if you didn't have it, you would have quit a long time ago, is generally the answer. Like, I've been on the road with people who didn't like to be on the road, and they get physically worn out and sort of unhappy and constipated and miserable. And you figure it out pretty quick. This is something that you're going to be willing to do. Yeah. You have to have the constitution for it.
Nice.
And, truthfully, it's really fun to play music. And so it fills you up every night. And then, you get a little exercise, you get a little food, you get back in the van with all your best friends, you make some jokes and drink some coffee, and it's, on to the next town.
Sounds like a good life to me.
It's a beautiful life. I can't stress enough how lucky we all are. It's so hard to play music on the road compared to what it was 20 years ago. There's the streams of income are just completely attenuated compared to what they used to be. You could expect to sell, 10% of the room was going to buy a record if you were playing okay. And, that's gone. And then inflation, everything is more expensive. I don't think to the radio that it's, if you're going out to dinner or you're buying gasoline or you're buying airplane flights or hotel rooms, everything's more expensive than it used to be, right?
Yeah.
So all the inputs are the same, and all the externals continue to be more expensive. And so we're just, every time we are able to do it and it works, it's not like, boy, I wish this worked better. You're just sort of amazed that it worked at all.
Yeah.
And so you have to just be grateful that you can go out and play music. It's a privilege,
Absolutely. And we're grateful to have you come to Mill Valley. We're looking forward to that.
Yeah, I love Mill Valley. I love that club, the Sweetwater.
It's an amazing place, huh?
Before, so I'm looking forward to it.
Do you have anything special in store for the audience that night?
Well, yeah. I mean, generally speaking, we'll get around to playing, if not all 10 songs on the new album, usually at least 8 out of 10. And usually we work up a cover of something that people might have heard before, because people enjoy that.
Sure.
Oftentimes in the middle, I have the band get down. When I saw John Prine the first time when I was like 20, in the middle of the show, his band all got down and went presumably to get a drink or have a smoke, and he played acoustic guitar for 2 or 3 songs, full stories.
Oh, wow.
And one, I noticed everybody liked that, but also sonically, it's such a smart thing to do, because you hear the band better if the band goes away and they come back, right? And then you hear the individual better when you get to hear them all by themselves, and now you get to hear them integrated into the band again. So we usually do something like that. We call that the union break. The guys get down and indulge whatever vices they have, and then I stay up there and play a couple songs, and then they get back up. And then sometimes, we go off the map and play something we've never played before, and it's a good enough band. There's not much I could throw at them that they wouldn't
Yeah.
be able to catch.
Sounds like a fun evening. Who's going to join you on stage?
It'll be the band from the record with one exception. So it's Eric Haywood on pedal steel and electric guitar. He's probably one of the foremost pedal steel players in the world, without stretching the point. He was in The Pretenders, and before that he was in Ray LaMontagne's band for a long time. Before that he was in Alejandro Escovedo's band, and he was on the first 2 Sunvolt records, and it's just played with everybody. And Jeremy Moses Curtis on bass. He was in Booker T's band for a long time. And let's see, then we got Eric Koskinen, who's probably, for my money, the best songwriter in the Midwest right now. He's lights out electric guitar player, so he's playing electric guitar, and he opens the show and with his own tunes, and frequently we get up and back him up because it's more fun to play together than it is to just watch him. John Convertino is going to be out with Calexico working on something, so we have Macaulay who's he's doing about half the fall when John is on the road with Calexico. So Don, people would know Don mostly from his behind-the-scenes work. He's the Rolling Stones drum tech, so he worked with Charlie Watts for about a decade before Charlie died, and now he techs for Steve Jordan.
Wow,
and then when he's not with the Stones, he's teching for Larry Mullen Jr. from U2. So he just, the last tour he met us, he had just got back from like Monaco or somewhere where he's working on a U2 recording. So he's busy hobnobbing with the stars, and then he gets in the transit band with us. His drums, and he's a great drummer. He plays a lot like Charlie, actually.
Let me remind our listeners, Jeffrey Foucault and his band will perform at the Sweetwater Music Hall in Mill Valley on Sunday, November 3rd. Doors open at 7 p.m. and the show starts at 8 p.m. You can get tickets right now by going to sweetwatermusichall.com. Jeffrey, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. Thank you for sharing your stories and the inside look at your music. It was a blast.
Thank you so much for doing this. It really helps getting people in the door, and that's the name of the game. If we can just have a little bit of help, we can always do the rest. So I really appreciate you spinning the record and spending the time to think about it.
Great. Best of luck with the rest of the tour, and we look forward to hearing more from you.
Right on. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Backstage Sonoma will be right back after this quick break.
Welcome to Backstage Sonoma, your all-access pass to the heartbeat of the Bay Area music scene. From jazz to rock, blues to world music, we bring you intimate conversations with the artists shaping our soundscape. Hear their stories, explore their inspirations, and dive deep into the creative process that makes each performance unforgettable. Hosted by Steve Roby, seasoned radio personality and best-selling author, Backstage Sonoma has featured Grammy winners like Judy Collins, Colby Kyle Lott, Leslie Mendelson, and chart-topping guitarist Adam Hawley. With over 200 episodes and 4 years of exclusive content, we keep you connected to the local and touring musicians making waves today. Whether you're a lifelong music lover or discovering new tunes, join us on Backstage Sonoma. Available on all major streaming platforms, including YouTube. Don't miss a beat, subscribe now and be part of our growing community of listeners. Backstage Sonoma, where the music never stops.
Thanks for listening to the Backstage Sonoma podcast. Join us next time for more great interviews and music from local and touring musicians. You can find us on the web at backstagesonoma.com.